Do you have a memoir in you or not? Let's find out. I've had the honor of hearing hundreds of authors tell their story. And after 15 minutes of intense revelations and all of these exciting ideas about what their story can be, they ask, is there a book here? Or they say what I said to my best friend when I'd finished a draft of my first book. I am really scared of how vulnerable this makes me. Is this worth the risk? Is there even a story here? It was a loaded question, I admit, because I knew by then what I wanted to say and what the story was. I just struggled with whether it would be valuable, whether anyone would care. I wanted to know for sure that that experience had meant something. The point is, it's hard to grapple with the self-doubt that comes with the territory of writing a memoir. This presentation is to give you questions to reflect on, so you can take an honest look at whether you have a memoir in you and whether it makes sense for you to commit to writing it. Before we begin, I know you're not here just because you're curious about writing a memoir, but about writing a great one. So let's talk about what makes a memoir great. There's a common misperception that dramatic circumstances make for a great memoir, and plenty of people convince themselves they don't have a story because nothing huge happened. But the best memoirs are classics, not because they have earth-shattering events in them, but because the author was honest about some part of their life, about the pains, the joys, the humiliations, the successes, and the failures. We read memoirs to see mirrors of parts of ourselves. We want to learn about the experiences of our own lives, our own shame, our own fear, our desire, our anger, our joy, and how we're supposed to make our way with all of that in the world. And we do that by looking at someone else's story and seeing the parts of it that resonate with what we've been through and what we think of our own lives. The catch is, what we'll be able to see in the mirror of your memoir depends on what you're willing to see within yourself. Now, you can't possibly write down an honest account of absolutely everything in your life, but when you're willing to get even a little bit honest about some part of it, especially with yourself, it's revolutionary. Why? Because honesty, which means looking at yourself exactly as you are, without trying to judge or change or manipulate what you see. That's the first step toward acceptance and compassion. I fell in love with memoir writing because it's the best practice I've ever found for truly accepting myself. And the thing that makes memoir writing such a powerful practice of self-love is the same thing that will help you write a great memoir: honesty. I know everyone has a memoir in them because, as my business partner Tucker Max puts it, every human life contains the entire breadth of the human experience. And if you're willing to get honest about some part of that, you have a great memoir in you. It's just a matter of whether you'll write it. Do you want to tell your story, and why? Let's uncover it. The first question to ask yourself is, do you want to tell your story? Why or why not? Take a few minutes to write down your thoughts on this. And a word here, before we get into whether your story is good or worthwhile, and there's a lot to say about that, you need to first recognize your own desires around your story and why you want to tell it. Your desire is the bedrock. If you don't see the value in telling your own story, even just to yourself, you won't be able to write a great memoir because you won't have the drive to dig deep to make it great. So here are a few prompts to help you unpack your thoughts further. What do you want to get out of remembering and writing your story? There are some motivations that work for this and some that don't. Writing your story, for example, to understand your past, that works. But writing your story to get revenge or to get a specific outcome from someone else doesn't work because it puts your motivation and your focus outside of yourself. As we already established, what can make a memoir great is when you're willing to take an honest look inward. Next question, are there parts of your story that you're resistant to writing? And why? What's your relationship to that resistance? Is it something that you want to work through or something you're not ready yet? It's okay to not be ready, and it's also a sign that you might not be ready to write your memoir either. So if you haven't already, pause the video now and jot down your answers to those questions of why? Why write my story? When people ask whether they have a memoir in them or whether there's something to their story, there's a question behind that question that they're really asking, which is, does my story matter? When you're asking whether you have a memoir in you, the question itself is proof that you already know you have a story you want to tell. You just need the courage to claim it. The fear in claiming your story is that by doing so, you have to acknowledge that it matters. And by extension, you matter. The truth is that everyone has a story to tell, and everyone's stories matter. At the very least, they matter to themselves, which means that everyone has a memoir in them. I know it can be challenging to claim that you have a story in you that is worth something. It brings up all kinds of fears, like, will other people be offended about what I have to say? Is this a worthy way to spend my time just sitting alone in my room writing for hours? The biggest question that almost everyone asks is anyone going to care? We lean on wondering why others will care because it can give us a sense of purpose to imagine that our story can help people see more of our own humanity. And that makes it worth writing. But even more important is to recognize that your story matters to you. The real question is whether you're ready and willing to accept that fact, that you have a story, that it matters, and then do the work to uncover what matters to you inside your story. This is incredibly valuable work to do, even if you only ever write your memoir for yourself. Your own understanding of your intrinsic worth will have ripple effects in everyone in your life, even if you never share your story. I know that from my own personal experience, but I also know that any story that goes deeply enough to claim truth and worth for one person is incredibly valuable for the rest of us. That's a story we care really deeply about. So, will people care about my story? Yes, they will, if you're honest. So, will you choose to write your truth? The process of writing your memoir will require you to define what your story is and what it has meant to you. It requires you to uncover your truth. And this isn't a one and done choice. Uncovering your story and your truth is an emerging process. I'm in the middle of writing a second memoir now, and I'm struggling with all of these same questions even as I'm neck deep in writing it. I've uncovered layers to this story that I did not expect to go into, and it has me wondering all over again how any of this is connected and why it matters and what my story even is. And believe me, it is uncomfortable. I keep wondering if I'm wasting my time with certain stories, or if I'll look crazy for sharing them, or if I'll even be able to wrangle this sprawling mess into a cohesive memoir. But even though I'm kind of mired in the swamp of it right now, I went through this on my first book. I know it's possible. I've coached hundreds of authors through this very part of the journey, so I know that the doubt I'm feeling is not a sign to stop writing. It's a sign that I'm starting to get to stories that are important to me. And my next step is to accept these parts of my story and claim their worth to me. I know by now that the bigger story will start to come into focus the more I find my own meaning and truth in each moment that I write. Deciding to write your memoir is deciding to go on a hero's journey. If you're not familiar with that phrase, Joseph Campbell analyzed myths from cultures the world over, and he found a common structure to all of them. First, the hero receives a call to adventure and leaves the ordinary world, and he encounters challenges and monsters and trials that test his commitment until finally he engages in the greatest challenge, which is to face himself, his past, his faults, and his power. And it's through that challenge that he gains the wisdom that he brings back home in the end of the story. This is the process you embark on when you decide to tell your story. And if your story doesn't matter to you, if you believe you don't matter, that is how you'll portray yourself to others. You do matter, if for no other reason than that you matter to yourself. And writing your story is a way to uncover how you matter. So how do you know that it's time? The assumption that you should wait to the end of your life to write a memoir is wrong. Just look at Anne Frank. She was a teenager who ended up writing one of the most read memoirs of all time. The point of a memoir is not to recap a life. It's to share your honest experiences about your life with others. And you can do that at any time about any part of your life. So how do you know when you're ready? Only you can answer that question. But here are some signs. You feel ready. It's just bursting out of you and you're excited to sit down and write. Maybe you find yourself telling stories about your life or wanting to talk to people about your story, or using any writing prompt or opportunity to journal or write about your past. You're starting to see how when you share your story, it has an effect on people. They resonate with it. They talk about it. it helps them. Maybe you feel drawn to read other memoirs, especially ones that you liked in the past or ones that you always thought you would read but never found the time to read before. You might be seeing synchronicities, like coincidences or signs from the universe around your memoir. And whether you believe that those are divinely sent or not, those coincidences show that your attention keeps getting pulled toward your memoir, even without your conscious intent. You have curiosity around this story. You're ready to look at this part of your life more fully than you ever have before. You might be thinking about parts of your past and asking yourself, is that really how it happened? And find that you're ready to start exploring that uncertainty. This is one of the most important signs that you're ready to start writing your memoir, which is that you are willing to show up as you are, not as you want to be seen. You're ready to make space for the emotional journey and even welcome the idea of making time for it. Maybe you've started therapeutic practices. You're going to yoga or therapy or starting to do some self-care things, and you're ready to go deeper. Simply put, you're ready to explore and feel the emotions of your past. You might be ready to document how you healed from some event in your life. You're ready to define your story so you can make it as powerful as it can be. You're ready to claim your truth, perhaps for the first time. But the final sign, honestly, is that if you're listening to this, you're probably ready. Otherwise, why are you still here listening to me? Chances are you don't need more reasons or signs. You just need to find the courage to begin. So where do you go from here? If you've decided you're ready to commit to the journey of telling your story, then the next step is to decide which part of your past you'll write about and map out which stories you'll tell. I've made an email course to give you a complete step-by-step guide to help you uncover the core of your memoir and get started writing. In it, I'll cover how to find the core of your story and build a structure around it so that every day you sit down to write, you know exactly where to begin, how to start writing right now with a proven formula so you never get stuck, and how to work through the challenging emotional stories that are bound to come up again and again as you write. Just click the link below to register.